Hey guys, tonight we are slipping back more than 3,000 years to the golden sands and shimmering heat of ancient Egypt. Imagine you are standing on a palace balcony in Thebes, the greatest city in the world. The sun, the god Ra in his fiery chariot, is sinking towards the western hills, painting the sky in strokes of orange and violet. Below you, the Nile, the lifeblood of this entire civilization, flows dark and serene. The air is thick with the scent of lotus blossoms from the palace pools and the distant spicy aroma of incense from the great temples. It's a world of immense wealth, divine power, and staggering ambition. A world where gods are thought to walk among mortals. A world where, honestly, given the state of ancient medicine and the average life expectancy, you probably won't survive this story. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And for a bit of fun, I'd love to see where and when you're listening from. Go ahead and post your city and the local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are a child, but not just any child. You are Hatshepsut, a princess of the blood, daughter of the mighty Pharaoh Thutmose and his great royal wife, Ahmose. Your world is the royal palace at Thebes, a sprawling complex of cool, high-ceilinged halls, private chambers, and lush, walled gardens. The floors are polished limestone, cool against the soles of your bare feet. Sunlight streams through high, clear story windows, catching the particles of dust that dance in the air and illuminating the vibrant paintings that cover every wall. Scenes of gods, pharaohs, and triumphant battles unfold in brilliant blues, reds, and golds. You trace the hieroglyphs with your fingers, already learning the sacred language of your people. Your father is a force of nature, a celebrated warrior king. This is the height of Egypt's 18th dynasty, a period of unprecedented power and prosperity. Thutmose didn't just sit on the throne, he expanded it. He marched his armies south into Nubia, farther than any pharaoh before him, bringing back gold, ebony, and tribute. He campaigned northeast into Syria and Palestine, pushing the boundaries of Egypt's empire to the Euphrates River. When he returns from these campaigns, the palace buzzes with a nervous electric energy. You watch from a safe distance as he presents captured princes and immense spoils to the priests of Amun-Ra, the king of the gods. He is everything a pharaoh should be, strong, decisive, and divinely favored. Your life, however, is a strange mix of privilege and rigorous discipline. You don't spend your days simply playing, your education is paramount. While other children might play with their wooden toys, little carved crocodiles with snapping jaws or cats on wheels that you could pull on a string, you spend hours with your tutors. You sit cross-legged on a mat, a clay pot of black ink beside you, practicing your letters. You don't use precious papyrus for this. That's for official documents. Instead, you write on ostraca, smooth, flat shards of limestone or broken pottery. Over and over, you draw the owl, the water ripple, the horned viper, learning the thousands of characters that unlock the secrets of religion, law, and history. It's tedious work, and your fingers are often stained with ink, but you are one of the very few royal women to receive such a comprehensive scribal education. It's a powerful tool, and perhaps your father sees something in your sharp, inquisitive mind. Your most important title, even now as a girl, is Hem Netcha Tepi and Amun, or the God's Wife of Amun. It's not just an honorary name, it's a real, powerful, and lucrative priestly office. It makes you the divine consort to the most powerful god in the pantheon. You lead processions of priestesses, shake the sacred rattle called the sistrum to appease the gods, and play a key role in religious festivals that are the very heartbeat of Egyptian life. This role connects you directly to the divine, a connection that will become unimaginably important later on. You have half-brothers, born to your father's lesser wives, but you are the most senior royal child, the only surviving offspring of the king and his principal queen. This gives you a special, almost sacred status. Historians still argue whether your father, Thutmose, recognized a unique spark in you. Did he intentionally give you this advanced education and this powerful religious title as a way of grooming you for a greater role? Or was he simply following tradition for the daughter of a great royal wife? The records are silent on his private thoughts, but as you watch him hold court, you absorb every detail. The way he dispenses justice, the way he rewards loyalty, the way his very presence commands obedience. You are learning more than just hieroglyphs. You are learning how to rule. Life in the palace has its own sleepy rhythm. The days are punctuated by meals of bread, beer, roasted fowl, fruits and honey cakes. The bureaucracy is endless, a constant stream of viziers and stewards and scribes reporting on everything from grain harvests in the delta to the amount of copper being mined in the Sinai. You can imagine it's the ancient equivalent of an endless series of PowerPoint presentations. Even for a princess destined for greatness, listening to an official drone on about the precise number of bricks needed for a storage depot is enough to make you pray for a minor plague to liven things up. In the stifling afternoon heat, the court slows to a crawl. You see nobles fanning themselves languidly, their elaborate linen clothing seeming to wilt. Many wear heavy braided wigs of human hair, perfumed with scented cones of fat that would melt over the course of the day, conditioning the wig while creating a unique aromatic profile. It's a very specific kind of glamour, one that requires a high tolerance for heat and greasy hair. Your own youth protects you from the worst of this formality, but you know it's coming. Your childhood is a golden cage, a luxurious training ground for a future that is already being written for you. A future of duty, power, and divine expectation. The golden age of your childhood comes to an end, as all ages must. Your father, the great warrior Thutmose, joins the gods. The funeral rites are immense, a pageant of national mourning that lasts for 70 days. His body is prepared by the embalmers in the Wabet, the pure place, a workshop of methodical and sacred work. His organs are removed and placed into 4 canopic jars, each protected by a different god. His body is dried with natron salts, packed with linen, and wrapped in hundreds of yards of the finest white bandages, with sacred amulets tucked into the folds. You, as the god's wife of Amun, play a central role in the public ceremonies, your chants rising with the incense smoke as his sarcophagus is sealed within its tomb in the newly established Valley of the Kings. With the Divine Father gone, the mortal world must adjust. The crown passes, as planned, to your half-brother, also named Thutmose. To secure his claim and maintain the purity of the royal bloodline, you are married to him. He becomes Pharaoh Thutmose II, and you become his great royal wife. There is no romance in this, no courtship. It is a transaction of state, a sacred duty. You, the daughter of the previous king and his principal queen, lend your unimpeachable lineage to your husband, whose own mother was a lesser wife. It's the ultimate family business merger designed to keep power within a very small, very exclusive circle. Your husband is not your father. Where Thutmose, I was a lion of a man, a seasoned general who radiated power, Thutmose II seems to be a paler imitation. The reliefs he commissions show him in the traditional smiting poses, bravely defeating Egypt's enemies, but the historical record of his military exploits is rather thin. There was a minor campaign in Nubia that he seems to have commanded from the comfort of his Theban palace, sending his generals to do the actual work. His mummy, when examined by modern scientists, revealed a man who was not particularly robust, suffering from a skin disease that must have been quite unpleasant. He was not exactly the poster child for pharaonic vitality. As his queen, your days are now a whirlwind of prescribed ritual. You stand beside him in the great halls of Karnak Temple, a silent, beautiful testament to the divine order. You are the earthly counterpart to the great goddesses. When he is Horus, the living king, you are Hathor, the mother and consort. You wear the vulture headdress, its wings framing your face, a symbol of the goddess Nekhbet. Over this, you might wear a crown of 2 tall feathers, or the sun disk and cow horns of Hathor. Your gowns are deceptively simple sheaths of fine, almost transparent white linen, pleated with painstaking care. Around your neck are broad collars of gold, lapis lazuli and carnelian, so heavy they feel like a beautiful yoke. Your real power, however, remains in your religious role. As great royal wife, You merge your old title of God's wife of Amun into this new, more elevated position. You are the chief priestess in the land, the feminine principle in the cosmic balance. Life in the women's quarters of the palace, the Shirim, is a world unto itself. It is not a place of idle gossip, but a complex and often competitive political environment. Your husband has other, lesser wives, and they all vie for influence and for their children to gain favor, but you are supreme. You have your own estates, your own staff, your own income. You oversee the production of fine textiles and the management of temple lands that fall under your purview. You give birth to a daughter, your beloved Neferua. She is a princess of the purest royal blood, a direct link back to your mother and father. Her birth solidifies your status, but it does not produce the one thing the dynasty truly needs from its great royal wife: a male heir. That honor falls to one of Thutmose II's lesser wives, a woman named Iset, who gives birth to a boy, also named Thutmose. The future Thutmose III. For now, he is just a minor child in the palace, far from the center of power. You are an expert in the art of appearances. Your public face is serene and supportive. You apply the thick kohl eyeliner not just for beauty, but because it is believed to protect against the harsh glare of the sun and to ward off eye infections. A quirky bit of ancient wisdom that actually had some basis, in fact, as the lead-based compounds had antibacterial properties. Your lips and cheeks are tinted with red ochre. You are a perfect image of queenly grace. But behind the scenes, your sharp, educated mind is always working. Historians still argue whether you were the de facto ruler even during your husband's short reign. Was his physical frailty a political liability that you quietly managed? When emissaries from foreign lands came to court, did they see the real power standing beside the throne, not on it? The official art, of course, gives no hint of this. It shows you as smaller than your husband, standing respectfully behind him, the model of a dutiful consort. But art in ancient Egypt was propaganda, not photography. It depicted the ideal, not the reality. Your days are long and measured. You might spend the morning overseeing your daughter's education, ensuring she receives the same rigorous training you did. The afternoon might be spent in religious rites at a nearby temple, the air cool and dim, the scent of burning incense a constant presence. The evenings are for court functions, receiving officials, and maintaining the delicate web of alliances that keeps the kingdom running. It's a tedious, repetitive, and deeply important job. Imagine having to attend the same divine board meeting every day for years, where the agenda never changes and the main shareholder is a falcon-headed god. It requires a specific kind of patience. You are playing a long game, though you may not even know it yet. You are building a foundation of respect, religious authority, and administrative experience. Every ritual you lead, every estate you manage, adds to your personal power. You are not just the king's wife, you are a pillar of the state, a pillar that will soon be tested. The predictable rhythm of your life as queen consort shatters with startling speed. Your husband, Thutmose II, dies. His reign was brief, perhaps only 3 or 4 years long, though some scholars suggest it might have been closer to 13. The exact length is debated, but his impact was fleeting. He goes to join his father in the afterlife, leaving behind a kingdom that is strong and stable, but also suddenly leaderless. The official heir is the young boy, Thutmose III, the son of the lesser wife, Iset. He is a mere toddler, perhaps only 3 years old. He is a child who can barely speak, let alone command an empire that stretches from the borders of modern-day Sudan to the banks of the Euphrates. An empire cannot be run by a committee of squabbling nobles, and it certainly cannot be run by a child who is more interested in his wooden toys than in tax revenues from the northern provinces. The situation is precarious. Egypt's strength depends on the visible, active power of its pharaoh. A long, uncertain period with a child king could invite rebellion from within and aggression from without. The entire political structure of the 18th dynasty is built on the idea of a strong, martial pharaoh leading the nation. A toddler, no matter how divine his blood, simply doesn't fit the bill. The solution at first is a traditional one. You, as the dowager queen and the young king's aunt and stepmother, are the natural choice to act as regent. It's a well-established role. A queen regent rules for the king, not as the king. She is the steady hand that guides the ship of state until the rightful male heir comes of age. You assume the title King's Mother, a fiction that smooths over the slightly awkward fact that you are his stepmother, not his biological mother. Your primary role is to protect his inheritance, to keep the throne warm for him. Everyone at court, the vizier, the high priest of Amun, the generals, expects you to play this part. You are to be the caretaker, the temporary custodian of power. You embrace the role of regent with an efficiency and competence that perhaps surprises some of the old guard at court. You don't simply retreat into the women's quarters and delegate. You are at the center of government. You have already spent years observing your father and husband. You have your own powerful religious titles, and you possess a keen intellect sharpened by the best education available. You don't miss a beat. The bureaucracy continues to function smoothly. The grain shipments arrive on time. The offerings at the temples are made according to the sacred calendar. The border patrols remain vigilant. From the perspective of the average Egyptian, very little has changed. They still see the symbols of pharaonic power, but now it is your name that appears alongside your young stepsons. In the early art from this period, you are depicted as a queen, feminine, graceful, but clearly in a position of authority. You stand behind the small figure of Thutmose III, your hand often resting protectively on his shoulder. It's a visual statement. I am here to guide and protect him. He is the king. You are his regent. It's a story the court can understand, a necessary political arrangement. But behind this conventional facade, something unprecedented is happening. You are not just managing the kingdom, you are running it with an iron will. You maintain the loyalty of your father's most trusted officials. These are men who remember the glory days of Thutmose's son, and they see his daughter as the best guarantor of that legacy. You don't purge the court or install a host of new cronies. Instead, you build on the existing power structures, earning the respect of those who matter. Historians still argue whether your move to become pharaoh was a long-term plan from the moment your husband died or a gradual evolution. Did you assume the regency with the full intention of seizing the throne, or did you find over time that the role of regent was insufficient for the power you needed to wield? It's a subtle but crucial distinction. Perhaps you discovered that officials were more likely to obey a command from a god-king than from a mere queen regent. Perhaps the title of regent felt too temporary, too weak to command the absolute authority needed to launch the ambitious building projects you had in mind. It's like being the acting CEO of a major corporation. You have the responsibility, but you don't have the full title, and you know there's a kid in the mailroom who is technically supposed to take over your job in about 15 years. It's not a secure position. The whispers must have started slowly in the corridors of the palace and the cool, shadowed halls of the temples. Your name began to appear more prominently on official documents. You started to adopt some of the royal epithets for yourself. The transition was not a violent coup d'etat. It was a masterful and slow-motion political maneuver. It was a public relations campaign of the highest order. You began to associate yourself more directly with the gods, not just as their priestess, but as their chosen heir. The priests of Amun, the most powerful religious faction in the land, appear to have been your key allies. With their support, your claim to power would have a divine seal of approval that would be difficult to contest. There's a quirky and fascinating element to this period found in the archaeology. A number of your early statues from the Regency show you in a transitional form, with a female body but wearing some of the male symbols of kingship. It's as if the artists themselves were trying to figure out how to visually represent this completely new situation. How do you depict a woman doing a man's job in a world where tradition and imagery were everything? It was a puzzle they had to solve in stone. The power vacuum created by your husband's death was real, but instead of letting it descend into chaos or weakness, you stepped into the void. You filled it so completely, so effectively, that you began to reshape the very definition of who could wield power in Egypt. You weren't just keeping the seat warm, you were reforging the throne itself in your own image. The stage was now set for the most audacious move in your career, a leap from the temporary power of a regent to the eternal authority of a pharaoh. The years of your regency, perhaps 7 in total, have been a masterclass in consolidating power. You have proven yourself a capable and decisive ruler, earning the loyalty of the administration and the powerful priesthood of Amun-Ra. But the role of regent is inherently temporary. It is a placeholder. You are ruling in the name of a king, not as the king yourself. Thutmose III is growing older. The day will come when he is expected to take his rightful place as the sole ruler. For a woman of your ambition and vision, this is an unacceptable future. You are not content to simply fade into the background as the Dowager Queen. You have plans for Egypt, grand projects that require the full, unquestionable authority that only a pharaoh can command. So, you make your move. It is not a bloody seizure of power in the dead of night. It is a carefully orchestrated theological and political event. You are not usurping the throne. You are claiming what you assert is your divine right. The core of your claim is a story, a divine myth that you and your supporters craft and promote until it becomes accepted truth. This story, which you will later have carved for all eternity onto the walls of your mortuary temple, is one of divine birth. The tale proclaims that you were not merely the daughter of Thutmose I, but the physical offspring of the great god Amun-Ra himself. The myth tells how Amun took the form of your father, the pharaoh, and visited your mother, Queen Ahmose, in her bedchamber. The room, the story goes, was flooded with the sweet, divine perfume of the god. He announced to her that she would bear a child who was destined to rule. Therefore, you are not just a mortal with royal blood. You are a demigod, conceived for the specific purpose of wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. It's the ultimate claim to legitimacy, trumping any other. How can a boy whose claim comes from a mere mortal king compete with a woman whose claim comes directly from the king of the gods? You can't argue with that kind of divine paternity test. This oracle, this divine proclamation of your right to rule, is your political masterstroke. It reframes your entire story. Your father, Thutmose I, is said to have recognized your divine destiny and presented you to the court as his chosen successor long before his death. This, of course, conveniently ignores the fact that he named your half-brother as his heir. But in ancient Egypt, the version of history that gets carved in stone is the one that counts. It's a brilliant piece of revisionist history. Sometime around the 7th year of your stepson's reign, you elevate yourself from regent to co-ruler. You adopt the full royal titulary, the 5 great names that every pharaoh used. You are no longer just Hatshepsut. You are Meatkare, a throne name that translates to "Truth is the soul of Ra." This name is deeply significant. Ma'at is the divine concept of truth, justice, balance, and cosmic order. By making it the core of your royal identity, you are sending a powerful message. Your reign is the embodiment of divine order, not a disruption of it. This is where the political situation becomes fascinatingly complex. You do not depose your stepson, Thutmose III. You do not have him exiled or quietly assassinated, which was certainly a tool in the political kits of other ancient rulers. Instead, you make him your junior co-regent. He remains a king, at least in title. On monuments and official documents, his name often appears alongside yours. However, the hierarchy is clear. You are the senior pharaoh, the dominant partner in this unconventional power-sharing agreement. You are the one making the decisions, commissioning the great works, and setting the direction of the state. He is the understudy, continuing his education and military training in the background. Historians still argue whether this arrangement was born of genuine affection for your stepson, a desire to maintain stability, or a shrewd political calculation. By keeping him alive and officially part of the government, you neutralized him as a potential figurehead for any opposition. Any noble who might want to challenge your rule couldn't rally support for the rightful king, because the rightful king was already on the throne, albeit in a secondary role. It was a clever way to co-opt any potential rebellion before it could even begin. The coronation itself must have been a spectacle of immense grandeur. Picture yourself in the most sacred sanctuary of the Karnak temple. You are anointed with sacred oils by the high priests of Amun and Ptah. You are presented with the regalia of kingship, the crook and the flail, symbols of shepherd and judge, the jewel crowns, the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, combined into the mighty pageant. This ceremony is the moment you transition from queen to king in the eyes of gods and men. It is a moment that has never happened before in Egyptian history. Other women had ruled, but usually as regents or at the chaotic end of a dynasty. No woman had ever taken the full title and authority of a pharaoh at the height of Egypt's power. This audacious act required the full support of the most powerful men in the kingdom. Chief among them was the high priest of Amun, a man named Hatshepsut, who you also appointed as your vizier or prime minister. This was an incredibly shrewd move, combining the highest religious and political offices in the land into one man who owed his position entirely to you. Another key supporter was the man who would become your most famous courtier, the steward Senenmut. These men formed the core of your administration, the loyal architects of your reign. They weren't just sycophants, they were a genuine ancient dream team who believed in your vision. Or at least, they were smart enough to hitch their wagons to your rising star. You had to be a charismatic and convincing leader to get these powerful men to back such a radical break with tradition. It was, to put it mildly, a gamble that paid off spectacularly. Now that you have claimed the throne, you face a unique and immediate problem: how to represent yourself. In ancient Egypt, the image of the pharaoh was not just a portrait, it was a symbol, a hieroglyph in itself, loaded with thousands of years of tradition and meaning. The pharaoh was Horus, the strong male god. The pharaoh was the bull of his mother, a symbol of masculine strength and fertility. The pharaoh was depicted with a powerful physique, a ceremonial false beard, and the traditional male kilt known as a shendit. The entire visual language of kingship was exclusively, uncompromisingly male. You cannot simply rule as a woman. To be pharaoh, you must become pharaoh, and that means looking the part. So, you make a conscious and deliberate decision to adopt the male iconography of the office. This isn't about denying your gender in your personal life. It's about fulfilling the requirements of the job. It's like putting on a uniform. If the uniform of a pharaoh includes a beard, then by the gods, you are going to wear a beard. Your statues and temple reliefs begin a fascinating transformation. In the earliest depictions from your sole reign, you are sometimes shown with a female body, but wearing the king's kilt and crowns. The artists were clearly grappling with this unprecedented situation. But soon, the transformation becomes complete. You are depicted with the idealized body of a male king, broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and muscular arms and legs. You are shown wearing the Nemes headcloth, the same striped headdress you see on Tutankhamun's famous mask. And strapped to your chin is the false beard, the divine beard, a long, narrow plaited goatee that was a symbol of divinity and kingship. It was held in place by a strap that went over your head, something that could not have been comfortable. Imagine having to conduct all your state business with that thing tickling your chin. Even the inscriptions change. The Egyptian language has grammatical gender, like French or Spanish. In your early inscriptions, you are sometimes referred to with feminine pronouns and titles, but with a male royal name. It creates a linguistically awkward situation, like the scribes themselves were confused. Eventually, they too fall in line. You are referred to as His Majesty, and the texts use male pronouns. You have become, for all official purposes, a man. You are no longer Hatshepsut, foremost of noble women. You are now King Ma'atkare, ruling as a son of Ra. This was not an attempt to fool anyone. Everyone in Egypt knew you were a woman. You had been the queen, you were the mother of a princess. Your transformation was a symbolic necessity. By presenting yourself as a traditional male pharaoh, you were reassuring your people and the gods that the cosmic order, Mahat, was intact. You were showing that despite your gender, you were a legitimate link in the unbroken chain of male kings stretching back to the dawn of time. You were making your rule look normal, even when it was anything but. Historians still argue whether this was a difficult personal sacrifice or a purely pragmatic political choice. Did you feel a loss of your female identity, or did you see it as just another tool of statecraft? We can never know your inner thoughts, but the consistency of the propaganda suggests a clear-headed strategy. You understood the power of image, and you used it to its fullest effect. You couldn't change the traditions of kingship, so you changed yourself to fit them. One of the quirky tidbits from this period is a statue that shows you offering new pots, small round vessels used in temple rituals, to the god Amun. The statue has all the hallmarks of a male pharaoh: the kilt, the bare chest, the powerful physique. But the inscription on the statue's base uses a feminine pronoun, referring to you as she. It's a rare and fascinating glimpse of the gender ambiguity of your reign, a moment where the official male image and the underlying female reality meet in one piece of stone. It's a grammatical slip-up that reveals the complexity of your rule. This adoption of male regalia extends to every aspect of your public life. When you preside over religious festivals, you are the male king. When you are depicted commanding your officials, you are the male king. When you are shown communing with the gods, you are the male king. You even took on epithets that were comically masculine, like mighty bull. It's a bit like a modern female CEO deciding to wear a fake moustache to a board meeting because all the previous CEOs had one. It seems absurd to us, but in your context, it was a vital performance. Think about the sheer force of will this required. You were not just ruling an empire, you were actively managing a public image campaign of unprecedented scale and complexity. Every statue, every relief, every inscription had to be carefully controlled to project the right message. Your artists and scribes were given a new set of rules for depicting the pharaoh. The template for king had to be meticulously applied to you. This performance of gender was a full-time job, on top of the already demanding job of running a country. It was a constant balancing act, to be the woman Hatshepsut in private and the male King Matkari in public, all to maintain the delicate fiction that was holding your revolutionary reign together. Your royal court at Thebes is the glittering epicenter of the Egyptian world, and you are the sun around which it all revolves. The city itself is a sprawling metropolis on the east bank of the Nile, a jumble of dusty streets, bustling markets, and grand villas for the nobles, all dominated by the colossal temple complexes of Karnak and Luxor. Your primary residence is a palace on the west bank, near the site where you are already planning your magnificent mortuary temple. It's a strategic location, close to the sacred necropolis where the great pharaohs are buried. A day in your life as pharaoh is a masterpiece of choreographed ritual and tedious administration. You rise before dawn, attended by your personal servants. The first order of business is the royal toilet. This is a ceremony in itself. You are bathed, perfumed with fragrant oils, and adorned in fresh pleated linen. Your makeup is applied, the heavy black kohl for the eyes, the red ochre for the lips. The heavy, elaborate wig is placed on your head, and over that, the appropriate crown for the day's activities. Finally, the false beard is strapped to your chin. The transformation from woman to living god is complete. You then proceed to the audience hall, a vast, columned space decorated with scenes of pharaonic triumph. Here, you hold the morning levee. Your chief officials line up to greet you, bowing low and avoiding direct eye contact, a gesture of profound respect. The vizier, your prime minister, Hatshepsut, presents the overnight reports. A scribe with a reed pen tucked behind his ear reads from a papyrus scroll, detailing everything from crop yields in the Fayum oasis to the latest count of livestock in the temple herds. It's the ancient Egyptian version of a daily briefing, and it's likely just as thrilling. You might hear about a dispute over land boundaries in a remote village, or a request for more copper tools from the turquoise mines in the Sinai. You listen, ask sharp questions, and issue decrees with a simple word or a nod of your head. Your every utterance is recorded by the scribes to become the law of the land. The court is a hotbed of ambition and intrigue. Everyone present is jockeying for position, for a sign of royal favor. A promotion, a new title, or a grant of land from you could make a man's career and secure his family's fortune for generations. They wear their finest pleated linen kilts and their most elaborate jewelry, hoping to catch your eye. You have to be a master of reading people, of sensing the currents of loyalty and conspiracy that swirl beneath the surface of courtly etiquette. One misplaced word of favor could create a rivalry that destabilizes a whole department of the government. It's like a high-stakes, slow-motion reality TV show, and you are the host, judge, and executive producer. Religious duties take up a huge portion of your day. As pharaoh, you are the chief intermediary between the gods and humanity. You might lead a procession to the great temple of Karnak, a city of temples within the city of Thebes. You walk on pathways strewn with flower petals, the air thick with incense, the sound of sistrums shaken by priestesses filling the air. Inside the temple's shadowy sanctuary, you perform the daily ritual of caring for the god. You alone are permitted to enter the Holy of Holies, to open the shrine that contains the cult statue of Amun-Ra. You ritually cleanse and feed the statue with offerings of food and drink, an act that was believed to sustain not just the god, but the entire cosmos. Of course, the priests ate the food later, but it's the thought that counts. The sheer scale of the temple economy is staggering. The temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak was the largest single landowner in Egypt, possessing vast tracts of agricultural land, enormous herds of cattle, and its own fleets of ships on the Nile. Historians still argue whether the pharaoh truly controlled the temple, or if the temple, with its immense wealth and influence, controlled the pharaoh. By appointing your loyal vizier as the high priest, you made a brilliant move to ensure that, for your reign at least, the temple's power served the throne's agenda. Life at court also had its lighter moments. Banquets were common, lavish affairs with mountains of food, roasted geese and ducks, huge joints of beef, fish from the Nile, and a profusion of vegetables, fruits, and cakes sweetened with honey and dates. And of course, there was wine and beer. Lots of it. A quirky fact of Egyptian life is that beer was a staple of the diet for everyone from the pharaoh to the pyramid builders. It was thick and nutritious, more like a liquid bread, and was a primary form of payment for laborers. The wine, reserved for the elite, came in large pottery jars labeled with the vintage, the vineyard, and the name of the chief vintner, not unlike a modern wine label. At these banquets, musicians would play harps, lutes, and flutes, while acrobatic dancers provided the entertainment. Even in this structured world, your unique position as a female pharaoh must have shaped the court's atmosphere. Your daughter, Neferure, holds a place of unprecedented prominence. You bestow upon her the title of God's Wife of Amun, the same powerful religious office you once held. In some reliefs, Neferure is even shown performing kingly duties, standing in for you at certain ceremonies. This has led to speculation that you were grooming her as your successor, planning to establish a female dynasty. It was a radical idea, and one that ultimately would not come to pass. But for a time, your court was a place where female power was not just present, but celebrated at the very highest levels. Your rule wasn't just a personal triumph, it was a matriarchal moment in a deeply patriarchal world. Within the glittering constellation of your Theban court, one star shines brighter than all the others, sometimes seeming to rival your own. This is Senenmut, a man of humble origins who rises to become one of the most powerful and influential figures of your reign. His story is inextricably linked with yours, and their relationship remains one of the most debated and tantalizing subjects in all of Egyptian history. Senenmut was not born to nobility. His parents, Ramose and Hatnofer, were literate but provincial people from the town of Armant south of Thebes. He began his career as a low-level administrator in the army, but somehow he came to your attention during your time as queen consort. You clearly saw in him a man of immense talent, ambition, and most importantly, loyalty. When you became regent and then pharaoh, his career skyrocketed. You showered him with titles, at least 80 of them, by some counts. He was the chief steward of Amun, overseer of the royal granaries, controller of all the works of the king, and, perhaps most significantly, tutor to your only daughter, Princess Neferure. In his role as chief steward, he was essentially your minister of finance and logistics, managing your vast personal wealth and the enormous estates of the Temple of Amun. As overseer of works, he was the chief architect for your most ambitious building projects, including your masterpiece at Deir el-Bahari. He was at the center of everything, a man with his hands on every lever of power. He was your most trusted advisor, your right-hand man, the one who translated your grand visions into stone and papyrus. His position as Neferure's tutor gave him unparalleled access to the royal family. There are several poignant statues that depict him with the young princess. In some, he holds her protectively on his lap, enveloping her small form. In another, more unusual block statue, Neferure's head emerges from the top of the block, as if he is her guardian and protector. These are images of remarkable intimacy between a commoner and a royal princess. They speak to the deep trust you placed in him, Naturally, this close relationship fueled speculation, both then and now. Historians still argue whether Senenmut was your lover. There is no direct proof, no "I love Senenmut" carved on a pyramid. To expect such a thing would be to misunderstand the nature of Egyptian record-keeping. The official story was that you were the divine spouse of the god Amun. There was no room in the official narrative for a mortal consort. Any relationship would have been a closely guarded secret. Yet, the circumstantial evidence is intriguing. Senenmut was granted the extraordinary privilege of having his own image and name carved inside your mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. In a hidden, unfinished corner, there's a now famous piece of graffiti that shows a male figure, presumed by many to be a pharaoh, and another male figure in a posture that could be interpreted as an intimate act. While some have sensationally linked this to Senenmut and you, in your male guise, it's more likely just a random doodle by a bored workman. However, the official depictions are more telling. Senenmut had himself discreetly tucked away behind doors and in alcoves, a silent, eternal witness to the sacred rites being performed for you. This was an act of incredible audacity. A commoner did not simply put his own image in a pharaoh's sacred temple. For you to allow, it suggests a bond that went far beyond that of a monarch and a minister. Another quirky tidbit that fuels the fire is the discovery of his personal sarcophagus. He had not one, but two tombs prepared for himself, a sign of his immense wealth and influence. One was a conventional tomb chapel for public offerings. The other was a secret, undecorated tomb tunneled deep under the forecourt of your own mortuary temple. It was as if he wanted to be physically close to you, even in the afterlife. The axis of his secret tomb is aligned with the axis of your temple, a final silent gesture of connection. Whatever the nature of your personal relationship, his public role was undeniable. He was the logistical genius who made your reign's great achievements possible. When you wanted to erect the largest obelisks ever seen at Karnak, it was Senenmut who had to figure out how to quarry, transport, and raise hundreds of tons of solid granite. When you commissioned your great trading expedition to the land of Punt, it was likely Senenmut who organized the ships, the supplies, and the personnel. He was the ultimate project manager, the man who got things done. His immense power, of course, must have created resentment among the older, more established noble families. This upstart from the provinces, this nouveau riche official, was suddenly more powerful than any of them. They probably muttered about him behind their hands at court banquets, resentful of his closeness to you. It's a classic story of court politics, the monarch's favorite, who inspires both loyalty and jealousy. You, with your sharp political instincts, must have been aware of this. Perhaps you even used it, keeping the old nobility slightly off balance by favoring this new man who owed everything to you and you alone. Towards the end of your reign, around year 16 or 17, Senenmut disappears from the historical record. His fate is a mystery. There's no record of his death or his funeral. Some of his statues were defaced, and his name was erased in some places, though not all. Did he fall from favor? Did he die naturally and his enemies at court took posthumous revenge? Or did he simply predecease you, and the erasures happened much later during the general proscription against you? We don't know. His sudden vanishing act is the final, enigmatic chapter in the story of your most important courtier, leaving us with a relationship defined by power, ambition, and a tantalizing, unanswered question of the heart. One of the defining features of your reign is your ambition, not for war and conquest, but for construction and beautification, all in honor of the gods and, by extension, yourself. You are not content to simply maintain the temples. You want to leave an indelible mark on them, to create monuments so grand they will astound generations to come. Your primary focus is the great temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak, the religious heart of the empire. And the ultimate pharaonic statement piece, the obelisk. An obelisk is a monolithic, four-sided, tapering pillar, carved from a single piece of stone, with a pyramid-shaped top called a pyramidion. It is a symbol of the sun god Ra, a petrified ray of sunlight reaching for the heavens. They are statements of immense power, wealth, and technical skill, and you decide you want not just one, but a pair of the largest obelisks ever attempted, to be erected in the very heart of Karnak. The journey of these obelisks begins hundreds of miles to the south, at the granite quarries of Aswan. Here, you can almost feel the blistering sun beating down on the granite cliffs. This is where you send your best engineers and thousands of laborers. The process of quarrying a single 350-ton block of granite without the aid of iron or steel is a mind-boggling feat of ingenuity and sheer brute force. First, the master quarrymen identify a suitable section of rock, free from fissures or imperfections. Then, the long, slow work begins. Gangs of workers, using hard dolerite balls, a type of rock harder than granite, pound and bash the granite, painstakingly creating a trench around the outline of the obelisk. Imagine the sound, a constant rhythmic thud, thud, thud of rock on rock, echoing across the quarry under the Egyptian sun. It's monotonous, back-breaking labor. To keep the workers motivated, they were well supplied with the essentials: bread, fish, and that all-important liquid currency, beer. Once the trench is deep enough, the workers have to undercut the massive stone block. They would wedge wooden beams into small cracks and soak them with water. As the wood expanded, it would exert incredible pressure, helping to crack the stone from its bed. For the final separation, some historians still argue whether they used this wood-swelling technique on a massive scale or if they lit huge fires along the base and then doused it with cold water, causing the thermal shock to fracture the stone. Either way, the moment the obelisk finally broke free from the mother rock must have been a moment of both triumph and terror. One wrong crack, and months of work would be for nothing. Now comes the truly daunting part: moving it. Getting a 350-ton stone needle, nearly 100 feet long, from the quarry down to the Nile was a colossal undertaking. The obelisk was carefully maneuvered onto a massive wooden sledge. Thousands of men, hauling on thick ropes made of papyrus fiber, would then drag this immense weight over a specially prepared causeway. They would wet the ground in front of the sledge with water or oil to reduce friction, a scene you've probably seen depicted in ancient reliefs. It's a testament to raw, organized manpower. At the riverbank, a special barge, a truly enormous vessel, built specifically for this purpose, would be waiting. The barge would be floated into a partially dug canal beneath the obelisk. The canal would then be flooded, lifting the barge up to meet the obelisk, which would be carefully positioned and secured. Then the water would be drained, the barge would settle with its massive cargo, and it would be ready for its journey north to Thebes. According to the inscriptions you had carved at the base of the obelisks, the entire process of quarrying them took a mere 7 months. This is an astonishingly fast time frame, so fast that some Egyptologists think it might be a bit of pharaonic exaggeration. A little alternative fact to make your achievements seem even more miraculous. The flotilla that towed the barge down the Nile must have been a sight to behold. A fleet of smaller boats, rowed by hundreds of oarsmen, pulled the massive craft against the current. As it passed towns and villages, people would have lined the banks to witness the spectacle, a testament to the power of their god-king. Finally, the obelisks arrive at Thebes, but the job is far from over. Now they have to be erected. The exact method is still a source of scholarly debate, but the prevailing theory involves a massive ramp made of earth and mud brick. The obelisk would be dragged up the ramp, base first. The top of the obelisk would be positioned over a sand-filled pit where its permanent stone base awaited. Then, workers would slowly and carefully remove the sand from the pit. As the sand level dropped, the base of the obelisk would be lowered with painstaking precision onto its foundation. Ropes and levers would be used to guide it through the final terrifying pivot into its upright position. It was the ancient equivalent of a NASA rocket launch, a high-stakes event where a single miscalculation could lead to catastrophic failure. But your engineers, led by the brilliant Senenmut, succeed. You raise 2 magnificent red granite obelisks in the court of your father, Thutmose III, at Karnak. Their pyramidions were sheathed in electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, so they would catch the first and last rays of the sun, shining like brilliant stars over the temple complex. You had them inscribed with your name and titles, declaring for all eternity that it was you, Matkari, who made this offering to your father, Amun. One of these mighty obelisks still stands today at Karnak, a silent, 3,400-year-old testament to your incredible ambition and the skill of your people. It remains one of the tallest ancient obelisks, still standing in its original position. While your obelisks at Karnak pierce the sky, your most enduring legacy, the project that will define your reign for millennia, is taking shape on the opposite side of the Nile. On the west bank, nestled in a dramatic bay of limestone cliffs, you are building your mortuary temple. This is not just a tomb, it is a mansion of 1,000,000 years, a place where your cult will be maintained for eternity, guaranteeing your rebirth and continued existence in the afterlife. The site you choose is spectacular. It lies directly beside the older, smaller mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, a great pharaoh of the Middle Kingdom. By placing your temple here, you are consciously linking yourself to a revered predecessor, reinforcing your own legitimacy. The temple's ancient name was Djeser, the Holy of Holies. Today it's known as Deir el-Bahri, Arabic for Monastery of the North, because a Coptic monastery was built there centuries later. But in your time, it is the most innovative and beautiful building in all of Egypt. The chief architect, once again, is your trusted steward, Senenmut. He is the mastermind who translates your theological vision into a stunning physical reality. The temple's design is a radical departure from the traditional, massive, ground-hugging temples of the past. Instead of a single, sprawling complex, Djeser is built on 3 ascending terraces, connected by long, sweeping ramps. The entire structure is carved directly into the face of the cliff, so that the natural rock and the man-made temple seem to merge into one harmonious whole. The effect is breathtaking. The clean white limestone colonnades of the terraces stand in stark contrast to the golden, sun-baked cliffs behind them. It is a masterpiece of landscape architecture. Let's walk through it as a visitor would have in your time. You would approach along a grand causeway, nearly a mile long, lined with sphinxes. These are not just any sphinxes. They are portraits of you, with the body of a lion and the head of a king, complete with the Neem's headcloth and false beard. The causeway leads from a valley temple near the Nile, which has long since vanished, all the way to the entrance of the temple proper. Before you even enter, you are walking through a landscape that tells a story of royal power and divine connection. You arrive at the first terrace. This was once a garden, a botanical marvel in the desert. The archaeological evidence shows that your gardeners planted exotic trees and shrubs here, including, as we will see, the famous myrrh trees you brought back from the land of Punt. 2 T-shaped pools would have shimmered in the sun, reflecting the colonnades above. It was a vision of paradise, an earthly recreation of the mythical fields of the afterlife. You ascend the first great ramp to the second terrace. This is the narrative heart of the temple. The walls of the colonnades on this level are covered in beautifully carved and painted reliefs that are, essentially, your royal autobiography in stone. This is propaganda of the highest order. On one side, in the so-called birth colonnade, the story of your divine conception is laid out for all to see. Here are the scenes of the god Amun, disguised as your father, visiting your mother. Here is the infant you being presented to the other gods who acknowledge your divine nature. It's a comic book of your sacred origins, designed to silence any questions about your right to rule. On the other side of this terrace is the Punt colonnade, which we will explore in more detail later. It meticulously documents your great trading expedition to a mysterious faraway land. These reliefs are not just propaganda, they are invaluable historical documents, providing some of the most detailed information we have about ancient Egyptian trade and exploration. You climb the second ramp to the uppermost terrace. This was the most sacred part of the temple, reserved for the most important rituals. A grand colonnade of Osiride statues, standing figures of you depicted as the god Osiris, with arms crossed over your chest, holding the crook and flail, forms an impressive facade. Behind this colonnade lies a central courtyard. To the left is a chapel dedicated to your personal funerary cult, where priests would make daily offerings to sustain your K, or life force, in the afterlife. To the right is a chapel dedicated to the sun god, Re-Harakti, with an open-air altar to catch the rays of the sun. And straight ahead, carved directly into the cliff face itself, is the sanctuary of Amun, the Holy of Holies of your Holy of Holies. This was the spiritual core of the entire complex, the place where the god's presence was most potent. One quirky but brilliant architectural feature of the temple is its astronomical alignment. Historians still argue whether all the alignments were intentional, but the most important one certainly was. On the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the light of the rising sun travels down the central axis of the temple, through the main gateway, and illuminates the statue of Amun in the deepest sanctuary. Then, a few moments later, it strikes a second chamber dedicated to you, lighting up a statue of you as Pharaoh. It was a piece of sacred theatre, a yearly cosmic event that reaffirmed your unique connection to the sun god. The temple was a bustling center of activity, staffed by a legion of priests, scribes, gardeners, and craftsmen. It was an economic engine with its own estates and workshops. It was a place of constant ritual, ensuring that your memory and your divine status would be preserved forever. But it was built with a specific weakness. Because it was so public and so magnificent, it was also vulnerable. Its beauty was a testament to your reign, but its exposed reliefs, telling the story of a female pharaoh, would one day become a target for those who wished to erase you from history. For now, however, it is your crowning achievement, a symphony in limestone and light, a stairway to the heavens built in the heart of the Theban necropolis. While your magnificent temple rises at Deir el-Bahri, you are not content with merely domestic achievements. You are a pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, a lineage of expansion and foreign contact. But where your father and other predecessors sought glory through war, you choose a different path. You seek to enrich Egypt not with the spoils of conquest, but with the marvels of trade and exploration. You set your sights on a legendary, semi-mythical land known to the Egyptians as Punt. Punt was a place of fantasy and desire, a source of the most precious and exotic goods that the Egyptians craved. It was the land of antiware, the fragrant resins of myrrh and frankincense, which were the essential ingredients for temple incense and unguents used in religious rituals and mummification. It was a place of gold, ebony, ivory, and exotic animals like leopards and giraffes. For generations, goods from Punt had trickled into Egypt through a long chain of intermediaries, but no pharaoh in living memory had sent a direct state-sponsored expedition there. The journey was considered too long and too dangerous. But you are not a pharaoh who shies away from a challenge. Around the 9th year of your reign, you command your officials to organize a major trading voyage to Punt. This is not a casual trip. It is a massive logistical undertaking, the ancient equivalent of a mission to Mars. The entire story of this expedition is proudly and meticulously documented on the walls of the Punt colonnade in your temple at Deir el-Bahri, giving us an unprecedented window into this remarkable achievement. The first challenge is shipbuilding. The reliefs show the construction of 5 large sea-going vessels. These are not the typical barges used for plying the calm waters of the Nile. These are ships designed for the open sea with high curving hulls, large single square sails, and long steering oars at the stern. They are built on the banks of the Nile, likely near Koptos. But Punt lies far to the south, along the coast of the Red Sea. There is no Suez Canal in your time. So how do you get the ships from the Nile to the Red Sea? The answer is a testament to Egyptian ingenuity. The ships were either built in sections or completely assembled, then painstakingly disassembled, carried overland across more than 100 miles of harsh desert terrain to the Red Sea coast, and then reassembled. This journey across the eastern desert would have been an immense project in itself, requiring thousands of men, donkeys, and a well-organized supply chain to provide food, and more importantly, water. The main route ran along a dry riverbed, the Wadi Hammamat, a path used for centuries by mining expeditions. Once the fleet is reassembled on the coast of the Red Sea, the real adventure begins. The ships are loaded with trade goods, not weapons of war, but things the people of Punt might value. The reliefs show them carrying Egyptian pottery, beads, metal tools, and other manufactured goods. Led by your trusted envoy, a high official named Nehesi, the fleet of 5 ships, each about 70 feet long and manned by a crew of 30 rowers plus sailors and marines, set sail south. The journey itself is a blank in the historical record. The reliefs simply state that they sailed on the sea. We don't know exactly how long it took or what challenges they faced. They would have hugged the coastline, navigating by sight, dealing with unpredictable winds and unknown currents. Historians still argue about the exact location of Punt. The leading theories place it somewhere on the coast of modern-day Eritrea, Djibouti, or Somalia, though some have even suggested areas further south or across the sea in Arabia. The reliefs depicting the landscape and people of Punt are our best clues. Finally, after a long and arduous voyage, your fleet arrives. The reliefs at Deir el-Bahari vividly depict the moment of first contact. The Egyptian ships are shown with their sails furled, pulling up to a shore lined with strange dome-shaped houses built on stilts over the water, accessible by ladders. The landscape is lush, with palm trees and groves of the precious myrrh trees. Your envoy, Nehissi, and a small contingent of soldiers go ashore, carrying a pile of trade goods as gifts. They are met by the chief of Punt, a man named Pharaoh, and his wife Ati. The Egyptian artists, with a characteristic attention to unique detail, depict the Queen of Punt as a woman with a pronounced curvature of the spine and large accumulations of fat on her body, a condition modern doctors have speculated might be a form of steatopygia or a glandular disorder. It's a strikingly realistic and non-idealized portrait, a quirky bit of ethnographic observation that has fascinated historians for centuries. The meeting is a success. There is no conflict. The chief of Punt welcomes your traders. The reliefs show his people marveling at the Egyptian goods. A great feast is held. The transaction is one of peaceful exchange, a triumph of diplomacy and commerce over conflict. Your expedition is not there to conquer, it is there to trade, and the trade is bountiful beyond anyone's wildest dreams. The great exchange in the land of Punt is a resounding success. The reliefs in your temple at Deir el-Bahari show your men, led by the envoy Nehissi, busy with the joyous work of loading the 5 ships for the return journey. The scene is one of organized, bustling activity, a testament to the expedition's primary goal, to bring the wonders of Punt back to Egypt. This isn't a raid, it's the ancient world's most ambitious shopping trip. The treasures are staggering. The inscriptions list them with gleeful precision. Piles of fragrant myrrh resin, the solidified sap that was more valuable than gold for its use as sacred incense, are heaped onto the decks. Lumps of raw electrum, that natural gold-silver alloy, are carried aboard in sacks. The ships are loaded with throwing sticks of ebony, chests of ivory, and cosmetic powders. Live animals are herded onto the ships. Leopards, prized for their skins which were used for priestly robes, baboons and monkeys, destined for the temple precincts and the palace menagerie. It's a floating zoo of exotic marvels. But the greatest prize of all, the one you seem to have desired most, is something no pharaoh had ever brought back before: live myrrh trees. The reliefs show your men carefully digging up the young trees, their root balls wrapped in baskets to protect them during the long voyage home. 31 healthy specimens are gently carried up the gangplanks. Your plan is not just to acquire myrrh, but to transplant the source itself to Egyptian soil. It's an act of incredible foresight, an attempt to domesticate the divine fragrance and make the grounds of your temple a paradise on earth. With the ships laden so heavily they sit low in the water, the fleet begins the long journey back north. The return voyage is as successful as the outbound one. The fleet sails back up the Red Sea, and again the ships are disassembled and hauled across the desert to the Nile. The arrival at Thebes is a moment of national celebration, a triumph that you orchestrate for maximum political and religious impact. The reliefs depict a grand parade. The treasures are presented to you in a formal ceremony at the royal palace. The people of Punt themselves, or at least a delegation of them who accompanied the fleet, are shown marveling at the splendor of Thebes. You are depicted in your full pharaonic regalia, receiving the tribute not for yourself, but on behalf of the god Amun-Ra, who, according to the official story, had commanded you to undertake this great adventure. This is a crucial piece of propaganda. The expedition was not for your own glory, but a fulfillment of a divine command. The success of the mission is therefore proof of your piety and the god's favor. You personally measure the piles of myrrh, resin, and electrum, an act symbolizing your control and the order you bring to the kingdom. The precious resins are taken to the temple workshops to be processed into incense that will burn on the altars of the gods. The exotic animals are presented to Amun. The most important ceremony, however, is the planting of the myrrh trees. You lead the procession to your temple at Deir el-Bahri, where the trees are planted in the prepared pits on the first terrace. For the first time, the sacred land of Egypt itself is home to the trees of the gods. Whether they survived and thrived in the Egyptian climate is unknown, but the symbolic victory was immense. The Punt expedition solidifies your legacy. It is the crowning achievement of your peaceful foreign policy. You have enriched Egypt, honored the gods, and accomplished something none of your warrior predecessors had even attempted. You have brought the mythical land of Punt into the Egyptian sphere of influence through trade and diplomacy, not force. The reliefs on your temple walls serve as a permanent advertisement of this success, a story for all eternity of how you, Matkari, brought paradise to Egypt. Historians still argue whether the Punt expedition was a one-time event or if it opened up a regular trade route. The sheer effort involved suggests it was not a casual, yearly occurrence. However, by proving the route was navigable and the rewards immense, you likely paved the way for future, perhaps smaller-scale private ventures. You were the trailblazer, the one who put Punt back on the map. A quirky detail from the reliefs is the depiction of the fish in the Red Sea. The Egyptian artists, clearly fascinated by the new environment, carved detailed and accurate representations of the local marine life. You can see parrotfish and spiny rockfish, species completely different from the familiar fish of the Nile. It's a small touch, but it shows the keen sense of observation and the desire to accurately document every aspect of this strange and wonderful new world. It's a moment of scientific curiosity in the midst of a grand religious and political statement. The wealth from Punt, combined with the products from Egypt's traditional trade routes and mines, fueled your massive domestic building program. The gold paid the craftsmen, the incense burned in the temples you built, and the story of the voyage gave you the political capital to continue your ambitious projects. The safe return of the fleet was a sign that Ma'at, the cosmic order, was strong under your rule. It was a victory without a single battle, a conquest of hearts and minds, and a treasure haul that would be the envy of any warring pharaoh. While the expedition to Punt was a spectacular highlight, the true foundation of your reign was peace and piety at home. For over 20 years, the land of Egypt under your rule was a stable, prosperous, and well-managed kingdom. You were a builder, a trader, and an administrator, not a conqueror. This focus on domestic affairs was a significant departure from the martial ethos of your 18th dynasty predecessors and successors. Your reign was, in essence, a long and welcome exhale for the Egyptian people. With no major wars draining the treasury or the population, the country's resources could be directed inward. The agricultural economy, the bedrock of Egyptian life, flourished. The Nile, in its dependable annual cycle, flooded the fields, deposited its rich silt, and receded, allowing for bountiful harvests of emmer wheat and barley. As pharaoh, you were the guarantor of this cycle. Your vast administration, overseen by your vizier, ensured that the irrigation canals were maintained, the grain was properly harvested, stored in royal granaries, and distributed as wages to state workers. It's the least glamorous part of ruling, the endless paperwork of crop reports and tax assessments, but it's the most vital. A well-fed populace is a peaceful populace. Your piety was the ideological backbone of your rule. You didn't just build new monuments, you also undertook a massive campaign of restoration. During the chaotic Second Intermediate Period, a century before your time, when the foreign Hyksos rulers controlled northern Egypt, many of the ancient temples had fallen into disrepair. In an inscription at a small temple known as the Speos Artemidos, you proudly declare, "I have restored that which was in ruins. I have raised up that which was unfinished since the Asiatics were in the midst of avarice of the Northland." This was another masterful piece of propaganda. You were positioning yourself as the great restorer of tradition, the one who healed the wounds of the past and brought Egypt back to its former glory. It was a way of saying, "Look how I am fixing things." A message that resonates with any population at any time in history. The religious life of the average Egyptian was centered around a dizzying calendar of festivals. And as pharaoh, you were the chief celebrant. The most important of these was the Opet festival. Once a year, the cult statues of the Theban triad, Amun, his consort Mut, and their son Khonsu, were placed in sacred barks. model boats carried on the shoulders of priests and taken on a grand procession from their home at Karnak Temple to Luxor Temple, a journey of about 2 miles. This was a national holiday. The entire city of Thebes would turn out to see the parade. It was a time of feasting, music, and divine communion. The streets would be thronged with people, hoping to catch a glimpse of the gods and their pharaoh. Your presence at these festivals leading the rites reaffirmed the sacred bond between you, the gods, and the people. You were the visible link in that divine chain. Life for ordinary Egyptians, while certainly not easy, was stable. An artisan working on your temple at Deir el-Bahri would live with his family in the nearby village of Deir el-Medina. His house would be a simple, mud brick structure with a few small rooms, a cellar for storage, and a flat roof where the family would sleep on hot summer nights. He would be paid in rations of grain, beer, fish, and vegetables. He might even own a few luxury items, like a painted pot or a small piece of jewelry. A quirky fact from the records of this village is that the workers were known to go on strike if their rations were late, sitting down and refusing to work. It's the first recorded labor strike in history. So, even in the divine monarchy of Egypt, the working man had his limits. Historians still argue whether your peaceful reign was a golden age of prosperity for the common person, or simply a time when the state was efficiently organized for the benefit of the elite. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. While the immense wealth from trade and mining flowed to the crown and the temples, the stability and the massive public works projects provided steady employment for thousands of craftsmen, laborers, and sailors. There was a sense of national purpose and pride, a feeling that Egypt was the greatest nation on earth, blessed by the gods and led by a pious and effective ruler. Your focus on trade also improved the lives of your subjects in subtle ways. The influx of new materials led to innovations in craftsmanship. The cedar wood imported from Lebanon was used for fine furniture and strong ship hulls. The copper from the Sinai mines was turned into better tools and more beautiful vessels. The turquoise was inlaid into jewelry. While you didn't invent this trade, your peaceful policies allowed it to flourish, bringing a wider variety of goods and materials into the Egyptian economy. You ruled a land that was for the most part at peace with itself. Your authority was secure, the borders were quiet, the harvests were good, and the gods were honored. It was an era of supreme confidence and cultural efflorescence. The art was elegant, the architecture was innovative, and the nation's spirit was high. This was the Egypt you built, not through the sword, but through the scribe's pen, the builder's mallet, and the trader's sail. It was a kingdom built on order, beauty, and a deep, abiding faith in the traditions you claim to embody, even as you redefine them. While you are at the apex of your power, commissioning temples and receiving exotic treasures, a quiet presence is growing up in the palace shadows. This is your stepson and junior co-regent, Thutmose III. For nearly 2 decades, he has lived in a strange political limbo. He is a king who does not rule, a pharaoh in name but not in practice. During the early years of your reign, he was just a child, his presence on monuments a formality to legitimize your own power. You ensured he received the traditional education of a prince. He would have been tutored by scribes, learning to read and write the complex hieroglyphic script. He would have been trained in archery, horsemanship, and the use of the chariot. His education was not neglected, but it was carefully managed. He was being prepared for a role, but the exact nature of that role remained undefined. As he grew into a teenager and then a young man, his position must have become increasingly awkward. Imagine being the crowned king, the rightful heir by patrilineal descent, yet having to stand by and watch as your aunt and stepmother wields all the power. The court officials would bow to you, but they took their orders from her. Foreign emissaries would acknowledge you, but they negotiated with her. It must have been a deeply frustrating and formative experience. You seem to have handled this delicate situation with great political skill. You did not ignore him or shunt him off to some remote outpost. Instead, you gave him a job. You made him the commander-in-chief of your armies. This was a brilliant move. On the one hand, it gave him a sphere of influence and a sense of purpose. It allowed him to develop the military skills expected of a pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. On the other hand, it kept him busy and, most importantly, away from the political center of Thebes for long periods. While he was out on maneuvers with the troops or inspecting border garrisons, you were in the capital, running the country. During your long and peaceful reign, the Egyptian army was not idle. While you launched no major wars of conquest, the military still had a vital role. They patrolled the borders, protected the mining expeditions in the Sinai and the Eastern Desert, and suppressed any minor uprisings in Nubia to the south. Thutmose III would have led these small-scale campaigns. He learned the arts of command, logistics, and strategy. He built a rapport with his soldiers and his officers. He was not just a palace prince, he was becoming a seasoned military man. The army became his power base, a loyal institution that looked to him as its leader. Historians still argue about the nature of your relationship with Thutmose III. Was it one of simmering resentment and rivalry, a silent power struggle waiting to erupt? Or was it a more complex, perhaps even cooperative, arrangement? The traditional view, popular in the 20th century, was that Thutmose III bitterly resented you for usurping his throne and was just biding his time, waiting for you to die so he could take his revenge. This theory was used to explain the later destruction of your monuments. However, more recent scholarship has proposed a more nuanced view. There is no evidence of any conflict between you during your lifetime. For 2 decades, the co-regency worked, the government functioned, the country was stable, and there were no attempted coups. This suggests a certain level of acceptance, if not outright cooperation. Perhaps Thutmose III recognized your effectiveness as a ruler. Perhaps he understood that he was too young to rule when his father died and that your regency was necessary. It's possible that you acted as a mentor, teaching him the arts of statecraft even as you held the ultimate authority. A quirky piece of evidence that hints at the complexity of their relationship is that Thutmose III's own daughter was named Neferure, the same name as your beloved daughter. It could be a coincidence, but in the small insular world of the royal family, it's more likely a gesture of respect or an acknowledgement of the family connection. It doesn't fit with the narrative of pure, seething hatred. As your reign progressed into its 2nd decade, Thutmose III was a man in his prime. The reliefs he commissioned in the latter years of your co-regency begin to show him as a more prominent figure. While you are still clearly the senior pharaoh, he is depicted as an active and powerful king in his own right. The balance of power may have been subtly shifting as he grew in stature and you advanced in age. You had married your daughter, Neferure, to Thutmose III, a move to further solidify the dynasty and perhaps create a clear line of succession. However, Neferure seems to have died sometime during the middle of your reign, leaving no surviving children. This must have been a devastating personal blow to you and also a political complication. With her death, the direct female line of succession you may have been grooming was broken. By the end of your long reign, Thutmose III was no longer just a shadow pharaoh. He was an experienced military commander with a loyal army at his back, a mature man who had spent 20 years as the understudy to one of Egypt's most effective rulers. He had learned patience, he had learned strategy, both on the battlefield and in the palace. The young boy who had inherited a throne he couldn't occupy had grown into the man who would one day become known as the Napoleon of Egypt. Your peaceful, inward-looking reign had inadvertently created the perfect conditions for the explosion of military conquest that would follow. The stage was set for a dramatic change in Egypt's destiny. The final years of your reign seem to have been as peaceful as the first. The great building projects are largely complete. Your magnificent temple at Deir el-Bahri stands as a testament to your power. The obelisks at Karnak glitter in the sun. The bureaucracy runs smoothly, the trade routes are open, and the gods are content. You are now an elder stateswoman, a ruler who has been on the throne for over 2 decades, longer than almost any of her 18th dynasty predecessors. You have presided over a period of immense prosperity and artistic innovation. Your health in these later years is a subject of some modern scientific inquiry. Your mummy, which was positively identified in 2007, has provided us with some fascinating and rather personal details. You were a woman in your 50s when you died. You were obese and likely suffered from diabetes. You also had arthritis, which must have made moving around painful. And, most significantly, you had metastatic bone cancer, which appears to have started as a primary tumour in your lung. the final years of your life may have been a struggle against chronic pain and illness. The powerful, athletic image of the king you projected on temple walls stood in stark contrast to the reality of an aging, ailing woman. The business of government continues. Thutmose III, now a mature and experienced co-regent, likely took on more and more of the day-to-day responsibilities, particularly the command of the military. The power-sharing arrangement that had defined your reign for so long seems to have continued without open conflict right to the very end. The ship of state was steady, its course set long ago. Your death, when it comes in the 22nd year of your reign, is not a dramatic event recorded in the chronicles. There are no tales of palace intrigue or assassination. It seems you simply died, perhaps from complications of your cancer or other ailments. As per tradition, your body was handed over to the embalmers for the 70-day process of mummification. Your organs were removed, your body desiccated in natron, and you were wrapped in countless yards of fine linen, ready for your journey to the afterlife. The mystery surrounding your death isn't about how you died, but about your burial. As Pharaoh, you had prepared a magnificent tomb for yourself in the Valley of the Kings, the royal necropolis your father had founded. This tomb, now known as KV-20, is one of the earliest and most unusual in the valley. It is a long, winding tunnel that descends deep into the rock, making several sharp turns. Your intention was to be buried there with your father, Thutmose I. You even had his sarcophagus moved from his original tomb to join you in yours, a final act of filial piety and a powerful statement of your legitimacy. But something went wrong. Historians still argue about what exactly happened with your burial. When the tomb was excavated in modern times, it was found largely plundered. Your sarcophagus was there, but it was empty. A second sarcophagus, which you had prepared for yourself when you were still just the great royal wife, was also found. The mummy of your father was not in the tomb. It had been moved again by Thutmose III back to his original tomb, and your mummy was nowhere to be found. For centuries, the ultimate fate of your physical remains was one of the great unsolved mysteries of Egyptology. The search for your mummy is a detective story in itself. In 1903, the archaeologist Howard Carter, long before his discovery of Tutankhamun, found a different tomb, KV-60. Inside this small, undecorated tomb were two female mummies. One was identified by a coffin as your wet nurse, Sitrein. The other was an anonymous obese lady lying on the floor. For over a century, she lay there, mostly ignored. It wasn't until DNA testing became possible that the mystery was solved. In 2007, a team of Egyptian scientists, led by Dr. Zahi Hawass, extracted DNA from the anonymous mummy and compared it to the DNA of your known relatives, like your grandmother. It was a match. The forgotten lady on the floor of KV-60 was the great pharaoh Hatshepsut. Why were you not in your grand tomb? The most likely scenario is that ancient tomb robbers broke into KV-20. To protect your body from further desecration, the priests of a later dynasty removed your mummy and reinterred it in the safer, more discreet tomb of your nurse. It was an attempt to save you, but it also consigned your identity to oblivion for 3,000 years. One last quirky and rather poignant tidbit comes from the CT scans of your mummy. A single broken molar tooth was found in a small wooden box inscribed with your name. The scans of your mummy's jaw showed that you were missing a molar, and the root left in your jaw perfectly matched the broken tooth in the box. It was this dental evidence that provided the final, conclusive proof of your identity. After millennia of silence, it was a tooth that allowed you to reclaim your name. Your long reign did not end with a bang, but with the quiet closing of a tomb lid, setting the stage for one of history's most intriguing posthumous dramas. You are laid to rest, your soul embarked on its journey through the underworld. On Earth, the transition of power is seamless. Thutmose III, your co-regent for 2 decades, finally becomes the sole ruler of Egypt. There is no power vacuum, no civil strife. He is an experienced leader in his prime, and the country is stable and prosperous, a legacy of your long and peaceful reign. For the first few years of his solo rule, nothing seems to change. Your name and image remain on the monuments you built. Your cult continues in your glorious mortuary temple. It appears as though your revolutionary reign will be respected and remembered. But then, decades later, Long after your death, perhaps as much as 25 years into his own 30-year solo reign, Thutmose III or his son Amenhotep II begins a systematic and thorough campaign to erase you from history. This was not a frenzied act of destruction in the immediate aftermath of your death. It was a cold, calculated, and centrally organized policy of damnation. Armies of stone carvers were dispatched to every corner of Egypt, from the temples of Nubia to the shrines in the Delta. Their task was to find every image and every mention of you as king and destroy it. At your temple in Deir el-Bahri, your magnificent Osirid statues were smashed to pieces and thrown into a pit in front of the temple. The reliefs depicting you as a male pharaoh were painstakingly recarved. Where your image once stood, the image of Thutmose I, Thutmose II, or even a blank space now appeared. The goal was to remove you from the pharaonic timeline, to pretend your reign had never happened. At Karnak Temple, the attack was even more audacious. They couldn't simply tear down your giant obelisks, they were too massive. So, Thutmose III ordered a high wall to be built around them, encasing them from public view. It was an act of architectural censorship, hiding your greatest achievements behind a stone curtain. Your name, Mat-Kare, was chiseled out of the cartouches on countless temple walls and replaced with the name of one of the Thutmoside kings. The scribes were rewriting history, literally carving you out of the official record. The reasons behind this prescription are the subject of one of the greatest historians still argue whether debates in Egyptology. The old theory was simple. It was pure personal revenge. Thutmose III, having seethed with resentment for 2 decades, finally got his chance to wipe the memory of the woman who usurped his throne from the face of the earth. It's a compelling, dramatic story, but the long delay between your death and the start of the erasures makes it less likely. If it were pure hatred, why wait 25 years? A more modern and widely accepted theory is that the erasure was a political, not a personal act. Thutmose III was a traditionalist. His own reign was defined by military conquest, expanding Egypt's empire to its greatest extent. He may have come to see your reign, with its peaceful focus and, most importantly, its female king, as a dangerous and unorthodox precedent. The problem wasn't you, specifically. The problem was the idea that a woman could be pharaoh. By the time the erasures began, Thutmose III was an old man, concerned with his legacy and the succession of his own son, Amenhotep II. He may have feared that another powerful royal woman in the future might use your reign as a precedent to seize power, disrupting the traditional male line of succession. To protect the patriarchal pharaonic ideal, the anomaly of your reign had to be corrected. History had to be put back on its proper course. The erasure was not about hating you. It was about protecting the institution of kingship for future generations of men. It was a cold, pragmatic decision to restore Ma'at, the cosmic order as he saw it. One quirky and somewhat ironic aspect of the erasure is how it failed. The workers tasked with the destruction were thorough, but not perfect. In their haste, they sometimes missed things. A cartouche hidden in a dark corner, an inscription high up on a wall. Your name survived in the shadows. The most spectacular failure of their mission was, of course, your obelisk at Karnak. The wall Thutmose III built around it actually protected its inscriptions from the elements for centuries. When part of the wall was dismantled in modern times, your words were revealed, crisp and clear, preserved by the very structure meant to hide them. Furthermore, the act of destruction itself left a trail. The ghostly outlines of your erased figure are still visible on the walls of Deir el-Bahri. Egyptologists can see where the stone was recarved. The violence of the erasure became its own form of historical record. By trying to make you disappear, your successors ensured that you would become one of the most fascinating and mysterious figures in Egyptian history. Their attempt to erase you created the very puzzle that modern scholars would be so eager to solve. For nearly 3,500 years, their plan largely worked. Your name was forgotten, your reign a blank space in the king lists. It wasn't until the 19th century, when Jean-François Champollion deciphered hieroglyphs, that scholars began to piece together the story. They found your name, Mat-Kare, alongside Thutmose III, and realized that a powerful, forgotten king had ruled. It took them even longer to realize that this king was a woman. The very act designed to condemn you to oblivion ultimately guaranteed your immortality, transforming you from just another successful pharaoh into Hatshepsut, the woman who was king, a figure of eternal fascination. Your story, then, is not one of a final, triumphant ending, but of a quiet fading, a slow and deliberate veiling that was intended to be permanent but ultimately failed. As the sun sets over the Theban hills, casting long, deep shadows that creep across the sand like a slowly drawn curtain, the memory of your reign begins its long slumber. The vibrant life of your court, the scent of the myrrh trees in your temple garden, the rhythmic chanting of the priests who maintained your cult, all these things recede into the past, becoming whispers in the corridors of time. For a while, your great work still spoke for you. The clean lines of your temple, a silent testament against the cliffs, your obelisks still catching the evening light. But even these voices were eventually muffled, their inscriptions chipped away, their context erased by the patient hands of men who came after, men who decided your truth was an inconvenient one for the story they wished to tell. And so you rest. Not in the grand tomb you so carefully prepared for yourself and your beloved father, but in the humble, hidden chamber of your nurse, a final, anonymous sanctuary. The world moves on. Your stepson forges a vast empire with the army you kept sharp and ready. Dynasties rise and fall. The language of the hieroglyphs becomes a mystery. The gods you worshipped are replaced by others, and the golden empire you presided over crumbles into dust and memory. The heat of the day gives way to the cool of the night, and a profound silence settles over the Valley of the Kings, a silence that will last for millennia. But oblivion, true and total, is not your fate, because truth, like the stubborn desert sun, will eventually rise again. As you drift now into your own peaceful slumber, let the silence of the ages be a comforting blanket, knowing that the story was not over. It was merely waiting for a new dawn and for new eyes to read the faint outlines of a history that could not, in the end, be completely erased.